Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this week's episode of The Couch Trip with Eddie and Billy, therapy for everyday life. We've got an outstanding conversation in store for you today. For the next 45 minutes or so, Eddie and I are going to be discussing the realities and misconceptions around shame. Shame is a really important topic. It's an important topic for every individual that hears or views this podcast. It's something that affects every single person walking the face of the earth, taking in air and living every day for that newfound nourishment. We hope that people who are dealing with shame after hearing this episode will reach out to people like Eddie and the people that do outstanding work in the specific space of therapy and psychotherapy as a result of this episode. So this episode's on shame. We're going to ask that you stay tuned. Good afternoon, Eddie. Welcome back.
Hey there.
As we record this episode, it is Masters Thursday. Yes, April 11th, 2024. As I look out my office window, a passing shower and followed by a little bit of sunshine, and hopefully they'll get round one in. As we record this from North Fulton County, Georgia, both Eddie and I are fans of the PGA Tour. We're certainly fans of Augusta National Golf Course. And I look forward to, subsequent to this episode, going and seeing some good golf. So, Eddie, how have you been?
Oh, about the same. I have good days, bad days, and a lot in between. It's like my golf game. Somebody goes, "Oh, how'd you play today?" Well, pretty much like every day. I hit some really great shots. I hit some horrible shots. And there were a whole lot of shots in between.
That's right. We have an interesting episode today and a conversation that I look forward to getting right into. It was a few years back that I actually read Brene Brown, The Power of Vulnerability. And there was a section within that book that really resonated with me because in my life, our family and close sphere has been touched by drug and alcohol abuse and recovery. Thankfully, I'm blessed to have to say that some family members of mine are in recovery and doing outstanding. And within Brene's book, The Power of Vulnerability, she touches on what she believes is the primary root driver of drug and alcohol abuse. And I had never heard this before, but it made me look at this loved one in a completely different light. And Eddie, where she went, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with the book, but she touched on the subject of shame and how in a lot of the work that she does with addicts and alcoholics, so much of why they suffer or why they chose alcohol or drugs as a way to quiet the noise in their mind was a direct result of the shame that they feel. Mm-hmm. So today's episode is going to be about shame. I'm not even sure if that analogy or that anecdote even applies, but I do respect Brene, and it meant something to me, as I said, having a loved one dealing with that affliction. How would you, define shame, and how does shame result or relate to the story that I just gave with having a person in recovery in our family?
Mm-hmm. I think Brene is absolutely right. Because shame is, in my way of thinking, the driver of everything. There's shame and there's the culture. Those two things together, and the culture is driven by shame. Those two things, along with your early upbringing and what happened there, and your early upbringing was driven by shame. Right. And it's not just shame that drives us. It's shame and the drive to cover up shame. So alcoholism is used to cover shame. We don't deal directly with our shame primarily. We do a million things, and that's why we're doing it. So that's the thing that most people don't add to, oh, well, that's, you are shame based or whatever. Brene is sort of the go-to person in the last number of years about shame. When I was coming up as a young therapist, even before that, going through school, and even before school, I was made aware of John Bradshaw, who in my day, he was a rock star. I went to a weekend workshop. I spent time with John in his workshops several times, at least a number of times. But anyway, this particular workshop was his homecoming workshop here in Atlanta. There were 5,000 people at the World Congress Center in this workshop. That's the kind of rock star he was. So the things that I learned about shame emanated from him. His first book, Bradshaw on the Family, was actually how I got into therapy. I was in Chicago for a job interview. This is long before therapy, and flipping through the TV, and I caught John on PBS. He had a series after the book came out. It was a 10-part series, each part 1 hour, going over the things in his book. And for whatever reason, I think it was probably his Southern kind of approach and to speaking, which was somewhat evangelical. It kind of caught my attention, and I started watching, and I was just like that the whole time. I'm like, this guy seems to have looked through the windows in my childhood home and watched us and wrote this about us. And he kept talking about go to 12-step meetings, go to therapy. And so in Chicago, I actually went to my first 12-step meeting. I think it was at the time, probably I can't remember. I think there were adult children or alcoholic meetings then. That became really big. So I went to 12-step and I went to therapy. I didn't start therapy in earnest for another number of months, but I did. And that was John Bradshaw. So his book, Healing the Shame, came out after his first book. That was his second book. And that's my Bible for what shame is. And I recommend that book over the books that I've looked at from Brene. I think that John gets a little more down and dirty with it, which I like, than Brene does. So let's go talk about what it is. Most people talk about, oh, well, I did this one time and I was really ashamed of that. They're really not talking about shame the way that I use it, and the way that John talked about it and Brene talks about it. They're talking about, I just felt bad, like I had done something wrong, which really fits the definition of guilt better than shame. Guilt is my behavior, something I did was wrong. It's correctable. I can apologize for it. I can change the things that led up to it, and then not do that again. Shame, says I am just irreparably damaged. The damage done to me, the things that are wrong with me, cannot be fixed. And this is something I know to be absolutely true. I term that kind of belief system a gospel knowing. You cannot argue with it, right? And you don't even try. So if I believe there are things about me that are so bad they can't be fixed, I certainly don't want anybody to know about that. I don't even want to know. So out of that place, okay, so what do I have to do? I have to do whatever I can come up with that will keep that hidden away. And that can be just about anything. I can be a drug addict, alcoholic, some sort of addict, and then people will go, your problem is you're an addict. Your problem is you're trying to cover up shame with drugs and alcohol. I can go out and become uber successful. in some way, shape, or form. Oh man, you're doing great. I can go out and try to be the most popular person. I can go out and try to be the least popular person. And in my way of thinking, shame drives us in this attempt to cover it up, along with the way that we were brought up, which of course is going to be shame-based, and the things that we were taught / trained to do and be in order to make it in the world. And then when we enter the culture is working on us night and day to be a particular way. So we're going to have those forces come together and create our particular way of being in the world, so that I'm liked, I'm loved, I'm cared for, I'm cared about, I'm admired. You could write out all day long how I'm going to do that. And all of that, in my way of thinking, equals then I won't die. It's a survival mechanism, because when we're traumatized, meaning shamed, as we're growing up, that shame gets locked in there. And being that we're small beings and the beings around us are monstrous, we don't have logic until we're 6 or 7 years old. So those first 6 or 7 years develop your nervous system. That's what, upbringing does. How, tell me about your mom and dad, tell me about your caretakers, your siblings, the upbringing, which is really tell me about what your nervous system was trained to do. And I've, over the last number of years, that's what I talk about with clients. You do this. We could talk about, well, you do it because you were shamed. You did it because you experienced trauma, but in any number of ways, but you do it. And I think it's so much more simpler because your nervous system was trained to do it, and it learned to do it so that it would survive. Why else does a young animal do anything other than to develop good survival skills? Because I can't go to the grocery store, okay? I don't know anything about feeding myself. So it's up to these people. And so I've got to make sure that these people will feed me. So I'm going to behave in a way that they find acceptable. And so, of course, everybody has this "I'm not good enough," which says I'm not good enough to be assured that they accept me and will feed me and I'll survive. That's what that is. Mm-hmm. Most people go, I'm not good enough to be loved, when I start to have a big down into it. And so that's how shame gets put in there. It's a training. Right? That was a lot. So.
Yeah, but what I heard you say was there's obviously root cause, right? You distilled the how we were brought up as children to deal with some level of enoughism, good enough, smart enough, strong enough, wise enough, good looking enough, whatever the case might be. And that then produces shame. And then that shame is a trigger that we inherently develop a response or behavior to that produces what in the power habit is called a reward or a result. That reward or result, and I don't mean reward in a perhaps a reward, but it could just be a response to that. Okay, shame is the trigger. I then try a few things to deal with that shame. And this is why drugs and alcohol is often talked about in this, because as people say, if you're an addict or an alcoholic, drugs and alcohol aren't my problem. They're the solution.
Right.
It's the issues in my brain. But going back to as children before, hopefully, that they're dealing with chemicals to quiet the noise or suppress that feeling that they just don't like, right? We only make decisions in one or two ways. We're either going towards comfort or away from discomfort, towards pleasure or away from away from pain. And shame is a painful feeling. It's an uncomfortable feeling. And so what can we do to get that acceptance, to get that love, to get that reaction, which, quiets that discomfort in some way. And it's that then creates the feedback loop as a younger person that we then, you called it nervous system, go back to in order to deal with anything uncomfortable or anything
anything. Yeah. It not only becomes a way of being so that the horror doesn't happen, because we learn all this in the state of all or nothingness. It's survive or die. There's no sort of, it won't be that bad. It's going to be unpleasant, but there's none of that. Okay, this means I could die. So caretaker is really experiencing just rage and outrage about anything. But as a child, children are naturally narcissistic in that I'm the center of the universe. And that takes a lot of learning to even go center of the universe, because as a baby, you don't even know you are. There's no you. Neurologically, you're just experiencing things, but you don't even know there's a you. There's when babies get to that point where you hand them something and they do this and then they drop it, they're not doing that to hack you off. They're doing that because they're learning, wow, I'm doing that, and I can do this, and this will stay there, and I can do that and it'll go away. That's just like it. So they're learning that there is this thing that they are, and that they have some influence in the world. But before that, that controls everything. So I have to make sure that all of that is working toward my survival. That's my only thing. Every now and then I'll laugh. There's still a part of me that's doing this, and there's a part of me right now at my advanced stage that still does that. That's not going to stop, but it does it differently now. Right? It's not doing it with the idea, the belief that I'm doing this and I've got to really pay attention because it can come at any minute. And I don't know from where and I don't know when, which is the way it is when you're a child. Hunger is terrifying because you can't feed yourself. So that is all the alarm bells ring when you're hungry. You don't know if you're going to die or not. So you scream, cry, and it works. You get fed. You learn early on that screaming and crying pretty effective. Okay, and a lot of people don't grow out of that. So that's what I'm talking about in this learning. Right? But then you scream and cry about something, and you get hit. You get yelled at. You get looked at in a way. That's right? That's shame. That thing you are right now. And again, as a small child, when I'm screaming and crying, that's all that exists. There's no happy future unless it happened. I can't think that far ahead. So I'm being told, when you are that, no, you will be hurt, neglected, walked away from, blah, 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 blah. And when that happens, now you've created someone who is shame-based, and you've created someone who will try to cover that up by being codependent. So that's how it drives everything. You've created somebody that will just wander off and dissociate to get away from the horror that's going on. So there you're creating an addict right there. Right? I'll just wander off. And then I discover drugs and alcohol, and boy, I can wander off like that and stay gone as long as I want.
Or they could call someone like you and learn how to deal with it in a more healthy way.
Yeah, which is terrifying.
Yeah.
When you realize what you have to do, which is stop wandering off. Well, that makes no sense to your nervous system, because if I don't wander off, I have to deal with something horrifying, which may be I have anxiety. That's not horrifying, but to your nervous system, because it's been trained in an all or nothing way, there's either I'm really comfortable, which means I'm probably just out in the ethos somewhere, or everything's over. My life's over. I had a client that I still see. She was 14 when she came in, and she started every session the same way when she came in the beginning. This has been the worst week of my life. I just want to die. Right? Now, after you hear that 12, 15, 18 times, and they show up every week, it's not going to happen. So, I go, well, of course you did. That's what you do. That's what you were trained to do, to have the worst week, no matter what happens. And it's always something different. And it's always varying degrees of uncomfortable. So I helped her learn that she could be uncomfortable instead of worst week of my life and I want to die. You literally retrain the nervous system. That's what good therapy does. It retrains the nervous system. Then you're different, because who I am, what I'm saying right now, why I'm saying it, is because my nervous system tells me to do that. The thing that I think is me is my nervous system. That's the way I try to get my clients to think about themselves. I'll say you're an electrical appliance, and you can actually control electrical appliances. So that's what we're going to do.
The electrical connections within our brain, the neurons that fire together, wire together, and they can be rewired.
They can be rewired. The brain is plastic. You can mold it. Now, there are limits to that, but you can do a great deal. I'm walking proof of that. Your brother's walking proof of that.
That's right.
That's what people come to therapy for, though they don't know that. They're coming because their partner's not happy with them. They have anxiety. They are now 30 and I did everything right and nothing worked out. Why is that? So that's why they come in. But what we're going to do is look at your shame and heal that shame, which people will talk about. I want to heal my shame. Okay. That means rewiring this electrical appliance, which means looking at these ways of being in the world that don't work. They just don't. They may have worked sometimes when you were a kid, but when I was coming up, we used to be taught that what children did to cope worked for them as children, and now it's maladaptive because you don't need to do that. But as I've learned more and more about it, I'm like, yeah, it probably works sometimes. But the real problem was the caretaker's issue. And if it's dad gets mad and he hits me, yells at me, that's because of something going on up there. It's not directly related to what I do. I can mess up and he's in a good mood and he doesn't care. I can mess up and he's in a bad mood and I get beat, I can be good and he goes, yay, he doesn't beat me because he's not in a bad mood. I can, be bad and he's in a bad mood and I get hit. So did it work? Well, sometimes, but it had nothing to do with what I did. And I came to believe that because it's evident that we come out of our childhood believing we have this enormous power to get people to do things because of our shame, and because of what we're doing to cover it up. I'm going to be good, and then I'm accepted. So I have this power. I can get accepted, which means I can control people. I can control their opinion of me. That's basic codependency. Codependency is being controlling and manipulative. No, most people that have been in 12-step for a while, when I tell them that, they've never heard that before. Codependents are controlling and manipulative people. And well, who are the codependents? All of us. Okay. I don't know of anybody who isn't codependent to some degree, depending on the situation and where they are, neurologically at the moment and who they're with. It comes out, and as much work as I've done on myself, it still comes out from time to time. It's there. So our culture teaches codependency is what love is.
So for those of us, Eddie, that are seeking acceptance, which it sounds like is a great number of us, if not all of us, at some point or another. The thought that popped into my head was, where does acceptance of self factor into this?
Right. Acceptance of self, people talk about, have to be more accepting. I mean, there's all kinds of therapies out there now that are all about acceptance. And, I think most people get acceptance wrong. Acceptance is accept me as I am. No, I'm not doing that. You're mean, horrible, and manipulative. No, I'm not accepting you as you are. As a matter of fact, if you're that way to some degree and I have to have so much involvement with you, I'm going to end that involvement. So no, I'm not going to accept you as you are. If I were being codependent with you, I would tell you that I am, and then I would do everything in my power to change you. So acceptance means, in my book, I can accept myself when I have worked through something about myself that I didn't accept, but I'm going to first not accept it, which is an excellent thing to do if it's something that really needs to change. Right. Now, if you don't accept yourself because you're this horrible human being that can't be fixed, then no, don't accept that. It's not true. So acceptance means I've worked through this and I can accept that part of me that I am to varying degrees, because it's not everything I want it to be. And sometimes it still messes up. And I accept that sometimes it still messes up. And the real key to know it's really acceptance is my response to when it messes up is not shaming. So, being kind, compassionate, accepting, all the things that we tout as the way to be are simply, you don't shame somebody. You interact with them in a way that's not shaming. And virtually any way you interact with somebody that isn't shaming is kind and compassionate.
And I hear you say often to be kind and compassionate to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think that although shaming others is a horrible thing, and I don't think any of us would willingly get into that practice too often. It's my belief that far more than not, the shame that we're dealing with is self-imposed.
Oh, yeah. I've often, when I'm talking to clients about this, will go, in reality, you've done more damage to yourself than anybody else in the world, because you're with yourself 24/7 and you're telling yourself 24/7, I'm worthless, I'm horrible, I'm unlovable. Your caretakers couldn't have gotten to you that much. They weren't with you 24/7. So yeah, you learned it all there. They trained you, and you took the training very well, and you've honed it, and you're really good at it. So it's up to you. This is about the relationship with yourself more than anything else. And that idea that you have to love yourself first is really close to being exactly right in that you learn kindness, compassion, non-shaming by practicing on yourself, because you've got tens of thousands of opportunity every day. Because in the beginning with folks, I go, I want you to really pay attention to the way you treat yourself. And you're going to discover pretty quickly that virtually every thought you have towards yourself is shaming. And even when you go, oh, I'm okay, you don't really believe it, because the part of you that feels the shame, that holds on to the shame, hears this, I'm really okay. You're really okay. And it just rolls its eyes at you.
Let me ask you this, Eddie. How many people do you interact with, or how common is it for someone to be feeling a certain way, an uncomfortable way? They're just not feeling good, but maybe they're not recognizing that what they're feeling is the result of shame. Kind of said differently, how does someone know that the challenge that they have is shame? And then obviously if once they make that determination, what type of therapy would be most helpful?
Yeah, I think in reality, this is so universal that it's not too much to say, to answer your question. You are experiencing shame, that you're shame-based, that shame is a big driver in your life because you're breathing.
Okay.
Are you breathing? Okay, then you're shame-based. If somehow you had caretakers that were absolutely not the least bit shame-based whatsoever, and they raised you that way, the moment you walk out the front door, you're going to get slammed with it. I mean, every day, all day long. And when you're a teenager, caretakers are idiots and they don't know anything and they're stupid, and these people out here are the experts. So you would reject all the kindness and compassion just naturally, even though your nervous system is trained that way. And you would wind up, after a while, it's not going to happen instantly, but after a while, you're going to fit in with your culture. And that culture will be shame-based.
Yeah.
So
no, I'm reminded.
Breathing.
Yep.
That's how you know.
It's
Do you need therapy? Are you breathing? Yeah.
But and I think that therein lies a very important lesson. And it's John Maxwell says something similar. He says, how do you know as a leader that your people need encouragement? They're breathing. Everyone needs encouragement. So, and I think, you and I certainly feel this way, and you've made a beautiful career in establishing quite a legacy on the belief that therapy is something that everyone can benefit from, and everyone should experiment with therapy to really unlock what pure bliss, joy, happiness, acceptance, love, unadulterated freedom could feel like, because many of us are really just prisoners of our own mind, our own upbringing, our own negative self-talk. But the fact of the matter is that what we're talking about here is therapy for everyday life, and everyday life implies that every person experiencing an everyday life can benefit from some level of understanding and support as it relates to that conversation or feeling that we're having, or are forced to have as a result of things that were totally out of our control based on the caretakers, as you refer to it. So it's let's not gloss over the fact that everyone's dealing with some level of negative self-talk. Everyone's dealing with some level of hiding away from others, something we feel not so great about, which is likely not as bad as we think it is. But we truly have to address it. We truly have to acknowledge it. And through the help of a talented and skilled therapist, your whole neurophysiology can be rewired in a way that the thing is no longer damaging. Am I hearing you?
Yeah. And where my mind was going was, everybody, in my opinion, needs therapy. I genuinely believe therapy could could heal the world. I mean, I really do, because therapy, and when I talk about therapy, I'm talking about good therapy. I'm talking about good therapy from good therapists, which means, and you'll hear, if you listen to many of these, the same thing I'm saying now, a therapist who has had decades of their own therapy. Right? That's how you get good therapy. I think good therapy could really heal the world, because, again, as Brene Brown says, as I believe, as John Bradshaw taught me, shame is at the bottom of this. Why are people blowing each other up? Shame, right? Why are people killing each other? Shame. Why are people divided, politically, socially, economically? Shame. That's it. And so if you can heal that, then boom. When I talk about money issues, I want to talk about, it's all about shame. If you struggle with money, it's shame. You're using money to try to cover it up, whether you're trying to be rich or you're being broke. Either way, it doesn't matter which way it goes. Your nervous system doesn't care. Let's just cover it up. I'll be really rich, then I get admired, and I'll never be lonely, as the County Crows sing. So, or you can be really just broke and never have anything, and you'll be so pathetic that people will come in and take care of you. So either way, you get what you want. You survive. So good therapy can heal the world. It can wipe out these divides. It can wipe out the differences between it. The reason, Joe hates Bob and Bob hates Joe is because they're both shame-based, and they absolutely know what's right and what's good. And the other doesn't think that's what's right and good. They don't have that gospel knowing that I have. And so, they have to be killed. It's that simple. Though it's all very complicated when you actually go out and heal someone's shame. But the approach and what you do and what you're doing is really that simple. You have these, belief systems is usually what people call it, but it's a knowing. And so you're up against any religious, political, sport fanatic. Go and try to convince a Phillies fan that there are other good teams. I mean, go to Athens and talk to people in Athens about what a great season LSU had. Okay, I mean, Alabama is really wow, a dynasty. Okay. It's not going to work. Okay. So that's what you're up against. And that's what you're up against in your own being. You're up against two opposing forces, and one of them knows the truth, and the other is trying to mitigate that and work around that and try to make that okay, Oh, look, see, we're really good. I mean, we won 4 Nobel Prizes, and this part of this. God, that's what you're up against. That's what shame is.
Well, there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Therapy can change the world by healing every individual one at a time that are dealing shame, which by Eddie's admission, and I agree, are all of us. So again, if you're dealing with levels of negative self-talk or discomfort, or you're just feeling disassociated, isolated, perhaps not well, reach out, find yourself an outstanding therapist, reach out here on this platform. We'll recommend one in your area, or just give us a question that hopefully we can counsel you on in a future episode. But we give this information because we truly feel it's valuable. We believe it to our core. And if we can affect one person to seek therapy, heal that wound that is their shame, go about their day or their week or their month or their year in a little bit better state of mental health, I do believe that we can change the world. So kudos to you, Eddie. And on behalf of Eddie and myself, Billy Courtright, this has been another episode of College Trip coming at you every week here on YouTube and everywhere you find podcasts. We hope to hear from you again. We'll be here.
Thanks, Billy. See ya.